And that's what brings us here to the US-Italia Education Innovation Festival. Throughout the next 3 days, we will be here in person at Stoa University in Ercolano. In the morning, for us the morning, for you the afternoon. Please join us every day between 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning for Eastern Daylight Time. And you will be able to engage not only with these existing individuals in person, but have a chance to ask them questions. If you look at your agendas at runtheworld.com, that is where we are hosting most of our sessions, except for the morning, which is on Zoom. You will be able to also speed date and get to know people from around the world who are also joining us. And if you have questions, you can be directed to where those are. So please engage with us, be part of this. I am so grateful to those of you who are gathered here today. And I want to bring up our first panel to introduce them to you to come up here and sit. So first, it is my honor to help you watch Ercolano come alive, and you will learn what that is. What do digital technologies, what does the learning process in education have to do with this? How can we open up history to the globe? It's one thing for us to speak about it. It's another thing for us to do it. And so first, we have Gianni Tramparolo, who's an author and a leading historian in Italia, who is going to speak about the environment, the world around which we live. After Gianni, we are going to hear from Michael McDonald, who actually, despite the name, he's a from the UK, an educator based in Italia. He's the founder of Gold Lotus Technology, and he has created an amazing interactive program for you to see. And then finally, we'll end with Marco Capellini, who's the CEO and co-founder of Centrica, to talk about and see how we can actually engage the arts through this same artificial and virtual reality. But before we do, Salvatore, who I did not thank, our fantastic technical leader, I'm going to ask you to cue the amazing video that you suggested so that our people can see it. Thank you all very much for coming, being a bold among our 40 that we're limited to here in Ercolano, Italy. And without further ado.
Si rinnovano i venerdì di Ercolano, quest'anno raddoppiati anche con il sabato, con un percorso particolarmente suggestivo alla scoperta della città antica. Quest'anno lo spirito guida sarà proprio Ercole, l'eroe che ha dato il nome alla città. Ercole, con la sua forza, la capacità di prelevarsi dal livello umano fino alla sfera divina, ci sarà da guida, ci aiuterà anche per comprendere la resilienza che in questo luogo noi impariamo. La reazione è uno dei temi di questa sera, la reazione e anche la capacità di creare reti, la solidarietà attraverso la quale si supereranno tutti i problemi. Dobbiamo riassaporare e riappropriarci dei nostri spazi, seguendo tutte le regole di sicurezza. Io sono particolarmente grato a Scabbec, il comune, è una rete che si è messa insieme per creare di nuovo condizioni di normalità e di piacere, di riscoprire le nostre radici e la nostra identità.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome here in Ercolano, Villa Campolieto, one out of the several villas which were built during the 18th century in the area which is now known as a gold mine. Golden Mile, which actually was a mile for the time, for the 18th century, it was a mile. Now it has become a much wider stretch of land, stretching from San Giorgio Cremano as far as Torre del Greco. And Villa Campoleto is astonishingly one out of the 122 villas which were built during this time. Actually, if you look at the frescoes behind me and on the sides, you can see that they were built also following the Pompeian and Herculaneum system, with the frescoes representing what was discovered since 1738 in Herculaneum first and in Pompeii later in 1748. Unfortunately, talking about the ruins of Herculaneum, they are not so well known as Pompeii is now all around the world. But believe me, it's one of the treasures we have in Italy and basically here in this area, Campania. Pompeii is known because it was the town where presumably they had 20,000 people living for negotium, negotiate commerce. Herculaneum was a very, very nice place. It was a wonderful place. It was much smaller than the nearby Pompeii. It was only 5,000 people, inhabitants living in a much smaller place, but still today we have wonderful frescoes, we have wonderful mosaics, we have really life still going on. I have to say that Herculano, if you look later, you will see also some slides, some photos taken by using a drone and from the air of the area where Herculano was founded, and then you will realize that it was very, very close to the water line. It was a place which was chosen by the aristocracy during the Roman times. Just a parenthesis, some people, some scholars presume that Herculano was founded by the Opici local population, later followed by the Etruscans, and then followed by the Greeks and the Samnites later before the Romans. Actually, some layers have only shown us the presence of the Samnites layers and following the Roman town had come. So what is really very important to know is that this was, according to mythology, founded by Hercules, Heraclion, Heracles. Can you see? That's the basis of the place where this famous mythological hero wanted the town to be. And then when he was coming from the Iberian region, he had admired the landscape and he had loved what the Greeks later and the Romans had loved after him. Well, what Eddie loved, the place where it was really in between, the mountain behind, the mountain which we now call volcano, Mount Vesuvius. Nobody knew it was a volcano, even though the root itself, VES, should also have identified the presence of something related with the fire. Ves was a fire in Greek, but nobody knew. There was always only one thinking, one belief. This was the place where the gods would live in that mountain. Imagine also that when they had first the earthquake, followed 17 years later in 79 after Jesus Christ, 17 years after 62, they only had one thought. It's a punishment of the gods. You see, that's the way it was seen. Nobody knew it was a volcano because that volcano had given them only one wonderful thing, the very, very important way of living. Imagine that any time they had an explosion, even without knowing, the land became more and more fertile. So this was a wonderful, really ideal setting. Mountain behind, the water of the ocean in front of them, fertile place to have whatever really they wanted to enjoy. I said that Herculaneum was, as now you can admire, was a place which had been created the same as Pompeii, the same as the nearby Neapolis, following the Greek and Roman style, with roads running east-west, north-south, Stenopoi, Platea for the Greeks, and Decumanus, Cardo, Cardines for the Romans. And it had become really a very, very popular place for the aristocracy to come and have the secondary house or villa dwellings. There is a difference between domus and villa. People just make sometimes mistakes. Domus is this kind of house. Villa is the place where you have a garden in the middle, and then the area for winter and the area for summer, which were scattered all around. Now you are just looking at some of the frescoes which were taken with the image of, in this case, Hercules. You see, Hercules is now about to enter the Olympus in this fresco. And what is also very important to underline about Herculaneum is that the presence of frescoes and the mosaics is, even in so many cases, more important than in Pompeii itself. You know, one thing which is also to underline is the presence of still 1/3 of the town to be discovered. Now, another very important thing is that, as you can now see this image, probably it does not say anything to you. That's the photo, that's the slide of a boat which was discovered on the shore, on the beach, very, very close to the ancient town of Herculaneum. Probably people had some warnings. They did not know, I repeat, it was an explosion. And then they were trying to leave the space, going via the water somewhere else, maybe to Naples, to other places which were not hit by the explosion. The first thing is that the explosion was probably at 1 o'clock and the winds were blowing southeast, so Naples was safer than other areas on the southeast place. I was trying to explain that the boat is very, very important because together with the other images of doors, windows, and furniture, that's probably the only place in the world where you can still see doors or maybe the boat which are 20th century old. You see, it's very important for one reason. While in Pompeii it was basically ash and the tiny stones called the pumice stones, in Herculaneum it was mud which invaded like a sort of river of mud, very, very hot, burning mud. But sometimes, obviously, there was rain falling, and then that mud became suddenly hard and covered the wooden stuff underneath. That's why, without oxygen, the wood underneath became fossilized, carbonized. And that's why you can still see entire shapes of doors, entire shapes of windows, and even pieces of furniture, which are really intact, as if they had been made yesterday. The boat is also a very, very good example to understand what kind of wood and then the size of the boats 20 centuries ago. Another very important fact is that by the water where the boat was discovered, there was even the presence of 300 skeletons discovered. They were trying to escape, as I was saying. But now there is also another very, very, very important question. I said that probably in Herculaneum they had 5,000 inhabitants. Only 300 skeletons were discovered. The question is really so important. Why only 300 out of 5,000? Because probably the date of the explosion was not the one we have underlined so far. 24th of August, following the scripts, the writings Pliny the Younger had sent to Tacitus. And then we had interpreted that probably it was 1 o'clock, 24th of August, 79 after Jesus Christ. But very recent findings, basically in Herculaneum, with the people wearing very long sleeves and warm clothes first, and the presence of olives, nuts, pomegranates, and figs and grapes on the tables, already explained it could not be the 24th of August, but rather maybe October or November. Then only months ago, believe me, only months ago, there was more research, in this case in Pompeii, which showed that it was something totally different. There was the finding of graffiti on a wall in Pompeii where somebody had written on the 19th of October that probably he wanted to do something on X Nov, on the 10th of November following. That's why we now presume it was the 24th of October, which means that probably people living only for summer periods, their vacation year in Herculaneum had already left and had gone somewhere else. You see, that's why there was the presence of not so many people as we could conceive. Now, from the the drone, you can see even the area we are now located, Villa Campolito, which is not very far away from the ruins of Herculaneum. Only, believe me, 3 steps away from here, you have the ancient entrance to the site of Herculaneum. Very, very important. Herculaneum is really a very tiny place to come and visit And in this case, with only one visit, you will be able to see the entire area of a very, very old 20th century old town. While in Pompeii, you need really a much longer time to be. There is also another thing. From Herculaneum, you can also see the presence of, in front of the place, of the island of Capri, of the Sorrento Peninsula on one side, and the Naples and Ischia, and the Misenum on the other side. Gene was explaining when introducing the place where we are, architects, engineers, doctors, whatever. Believe me, artifacts were discovered in Herculaneum, the same as Pompeii, for medicine. And we also have the presence, talking about the aqueducts and the water system they had invented, of the so famous lead pipes they used to transport the water from uptown, downtown, and then coming from Mount Serino and going as far as Misenum I was describing. Obviously, Herculaneum still shows even the presence of shops and houses and the places where they went to amuse themselves, like the Thermopolia, like the ancient tabards of the time. You may maybe explain the word Thermopolium by using only one modern word, McDonald's, and maybe other places, you know, fast food restaurants where people would go and drink their wine. Talking about one very important thing, the use of lead. People always think that they use the lead and then together with the water, they could also have brain problems and then man could become sterile. But Herculano has also shown, as there was in one out of the several pots discovered, the presence of wine. And they had also discovered, I mean, scholars and people doing some deeper works, that there was a presence of lead inside wine. They used the lead in wine to mix lead and wine and drink, because wine was not really the best wine they could really have. And then there was the use of like saccharin, and that's why that would provoke brain problems, which was considered later one of the most important problems for the fall of the Roman Empire. Just to give you the idea that Herculano is a place where we can also have deeper studies. You know, just a couple more things to add, and then I will give the word to Marco. There is one very important thing, the presence of skeletons. And we have original teeth, which also explain the DNA, for example. So that's very, very important. So it's here in Herculano. Believe me or not, there was the presence of the sewer in Herculano, and an anthropologist some years ago came, he went down and he discovered, sorry if maybe I can translate in a different way. He found some brown pieces of good luck, and then he could also explain what was the daily diet of the people living in this area. You see, that's really a very, very important place to understand where we come from and why we became what we are today. Okay, thank you very much for your listening to us. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay, please send your questions through Zoom, and we'll be taking more later, but we're going to next go to our educator extraordinaire and ed technologist, Michael McDonald. So if we could spotlight Michael McDonald for his period, that would be great. There he is. Welcome, Michael.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me clearly? Good. People telling me that they can hear me. Unless I get any other messages, I will continue talking. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are watching this, or if you're lucky enough to be in Herculano, then well done for getting there. I hope you're having a lovely time. My name is Michael McDonald, and I'm here to add the educator's perspective into all of this wonderful discussion that we're having today and in the next 2 days over this inaugural first event of the Education Innovation Festival. So thank you for your attention. My particular expertise is in using virtual reality to improve the way that people learn languages, English in particular, but also share their cultural heritage and understand a bit more in the process about their own identity, cultural identity, and where they come from as well. So it's this mishmash of languages and culture that I'm interested in coming from. So I'm going to share my screen now with just a few slides to give some perspective to what I want to talk to you about for the next 10 minutes before I show you a very interesting tour of Herculano. So I'm sharing my slides now. And we'll jump to the first slide, which would make sense. Hopefully you can see that. If you cannot see the slides, then please do send me a message in the message box, but let's just reduce the video. So yes, this is the very first event, but you know, when we consider how can technology, in particular virtual reality, and I've got a VR headset here, how can technology improve the way that we share cultural heritage and stories from the past? I think it's important to take a step back and understand a bit more clearly what are the barriers to learning and education. And for me as a teacher for the last 10 years, I've noticed that it's cost and physical location. I'm actually in Italy at the moment, in Lecce, in Puglia, on the other side of where you are now, this peninsula. But many people, if they want to learn Italian, they physically can't come here, can they? And if I want to learn English, I can't maybe afford to go to New York or London to spend all that money on a course. But those are the barriers. But particularly, in my opinion, in the developed world, I think it's much deeper than that, the problem. And it comes down to three words which we've seen in ancient Greece, Rome, and of course English, or the English language, and it's aura, ethos, and art. And I really believe that that is the biggest problem for educators at the moment, and education and innovation in general, is that we need to find our aura, our state of being, to reflect and embody passionate educators who are enthusiastic about driving education forward. Of course, ethos is another important word in this context, and I think sometimes, you know, life is busy, modern life is busy, and maybe along the way we've lost a little bit of the ethos of what it is to be an educator. You are a mentor to people. You should not approach your work necessarily as, you know, somebody that's just looking after 30 children. You have a much greater role in their education. And finally, the art. You know, this comes from artem, and it is the craftsmanship, the idea that you are an apprentice of a study. And even if you're an educator, then actually you should dedicate yourself to improving always the way that you can teach a language, culture, science, maths, whatever it is. A bit more context, I studied German a good few years ago now, and I used a paper dictionary. But since then, we've actually seen the advance of technology such as virtual reality. And this is a Google cardboard device. Maybe some of you have tried that. You insert your smartphone device into this, you close it, and it is a window to another world. Even more recent still, we have the full virtual reality, where you can walk around in the physical world, and it's actually walking you around in the virtual world also. And with this device, that's what I use on pretty much a daily basis to improve the way my students learn language and share cultural stories. Platforms to do that and engage. Rumi and Altspace are three platforms you might want to remember, and if you have any questions about these, you can just put those in the comments of this video. But I'm coming at this again from a practical perspective. So you're a teacher, you want to use virtual reality, you think it could have a place in your classroom. What are the platforms out there? These three are my recommendations for some of the smoothest experiences you can have to connect with people in real time anywhere in the world, which in itself is pretty magical. Here's an example, a video I'm going to play for just 20 seconds. Me on Mars teaching an Italian student some vocabulary.
Maybe the future in maybe 10 or 20 years is that we can have the opportunity to travel to Mars. And would you like to do that?
No, I prefer stay where are trees, in the lakes and
Yes.
water and
Good. So that's just a quick taste of an interesting and very contextual place that you can learn English in virtual reality. And when we look at the research behind people actually physically going to study abroad, it's very interesting in the results that are produced in their vocabulary and oral and oral skills. For example, Takiza in 1991, a long time ago now, but they were still valid, these results, is that people benefited most when physically traveling traveling to places because of the availability of native speakers, the enhanced motivation for learning new words, so there's more stimulus, and finally a large number of possible contexts or settings in which to practice that new vocabulary. And that really forms the premise, the basis, the fundamental foundations upon which I teach languages and cultural heritage, because I believe if that works in the physical world, well, why can't it work in the virtual world also? This is another video of students learning English on a train in London.
Nice.
Oh, there. Oh. Oh.
So let's jump on the tube.
Oh.
So hold on tight, everybody, because it's moving quite fast. What do you think is the advantage of a tube versus a bus?
I mean, since the tubes is most likely underground,
Yes.
it doesn't have anything that can, for example, barricade it or stop.
Good, so that was just a quick snapshot of how you can bring students into these virtual worlds. And these students actually were in Norway, in Bergen in Norway, and I was in Lecce in Italy at the time, and it was all real-time communication in context. And we were on the London Underground train, and that's really easy to do. So the next slide shows some of the cultural projects we're working on as well in the University of Salento in Italy. And this is an ancient church from Salento, Apulia, 1,400 years old. We used a 3D model of this, and we will be researching the efficacy of language learning in these environments as well. You can see the video in a moment, pans around, and also what you're doing is you're resurrecting culture that ordinarily would be lost, and I'll show you in a moment how we can do that with Ercolano. You go outside and see the tombs where the local people actually were buried outside that church as well, and this is all original brickwork mapped into the virtual environment. So that's some great work happening there in southern Italy. So let me go back a few slides. Sorry, it doesn't matter which language you speak, English for me or Italians for the this US Italia conference. Accessibility or accessibilità doesn't matter. We will understand that word. How can we make it more accessible to people around the world? Because not everybody can afford to spend 400 euros on a headset like this. You know, cost is subjective, affordability is subjective. But what can we do to broaden this technology to a wider group of people and involve as many people as possible in this new chapter of technology and education? Well, WebVR, I'll say that again, WebVR. You need to look into this if you don't know about it already. This is a technology which is browser based, so you can access it through your smartphone. You don't need a headset, but you can also actually share 3D models in real time with people around the world as well. And this is just a quick creation I did of Hercules, as the previous speaker said very correctly. It was actually based on the myth of Hercules, the name of Ercolano. And we also have Mozilla Hubs, which is tools providing you the ability to create digital twins, even digital versions of the physical world that you are immersed in now, with all its beautiful history in Campania, Italy. And this is a VR English school I created, but anything's possible. And I want to show you another example just to underline before we take the quick tour of Ercolano that I produced earlier. What we've got here is a representation of how spatial 3D learning can actually support the way that students develop their skills for the future world of work. What we've got here is a snapshot of the Giza Sphinx, and there's a theory to say that this wasn't constructed in 2500 BC, but actually, possibly, it was constructed actually 10,000 BC when the Sphinx was looking at the constellation of Leo. And what you can do with students in this case is show them the Sphinx. They can walk around it in 360 degrees, and they can actually then get the perspective of the Sphinx looking at itself in the stars above them. And that's just one quick example of how 3D spatial learning can build this deeper understanding of astronomy or cultural heritage. Well, we're getting close to the slides now. I know slides aren't always popular for many people, but you've survived so far, so thank you for your attention. If you are interested in learning more about how you can collaborate with other teachers, educators, academics, researchers around the world, then check out this website. It's educatorsinvr.com. I lead the language learning aspect of that, but whatever you're interested in, come and join us, and we can improve the way that maybe you approach teaching or learning. And that's it. That's my details. Michael McDonald, goldlotus.co is the website. That's the consultancy I run in southern Italy, Puglia. But of course, this is digital. I can meet you anywhere you like in the world or virtually. What I want to do now, we actually planned to do a live virtual tour, but as they say in Hollywood, I think it's never work with children or animals. And I'll add never work with VR to the list as well, with live streams, because when I'm sharing my screen like I'm doing now on Zoom, there's going to be a lot of lag and a lot of delay, and it's not going to do the content justice. So what I'm going to do is show you something I prepared literally 2 hours ago on my VR headset, and I live streamed it to my computer. And it's going to give you a quick taste of the history of Ercolano and how we can connect virtual reality to that history to promote it better. So here we go. Just give me a moment. I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to bring up the video. If there are any questions, please do ask them. I'll be happy to respond now or later. But let me find the video right now. Here we go. A very patient bunch, thank you. We're going to open the video from the computer, and we're going to start at the top of Mount Vesuvius, which is the guilty party behind why Ercolano was buried for 1700 years. But I'm going to share the stream right now with you, and you'll be able to hopefully hear the audio. So share screen. So you should now be able to see the stream that I filmed just 2 hours ago. Let me double check that you can indeed hear the audio. Yes, I think we're set. It's like flying a jumbo jet. There are so many controls here. Good. If you cannot, when I start this video in 3 seconds, see it, you send me a message and I'll fix it. So here we go.
In Italy, in the Campania region, and what a beautiful day it is. But unfortunately, in or on or around the 17th of October of the year 1790, there was a huge explosion which came from this very crater, rocketed into the sky and covered most of Pompeii. But the city that you find yourselves in now, virtually or physically, Ercolano, was actually affected by the later waves of the pyroclastic blasts, which are basically blasts around 7 times that hit Ercolano and covered it with ash and mud and debris. And it was that which caused people to unfortunately suffocate in their homes and workplaces. And but what it did do was preserve incredibly well the city of Ercolano. So let's jump down now to the city, which is in that area over there on the Bay of Naples, and we're going to jump now into the city. So before we jump into the city of Ercolano, this is by a gentleman on the city's website called Jacques Rocher. Please go and check out his work and give him credit for his beautiful photography. But we're going to enter VR right now. We click that and we select the words enter VR, and here we are standing at the foot of Mount Vesuvius, 13 kilometers away. But it was this very city, Ercolano, that all those years ago was covered in mud and debris, and it was only 1700 years later, after that event, in the 1700s, the 18th century, that they discovered this very city that we're standing in right now. So as you can see, it's a wonderful opportunity to immerse your students in places like this. Maybe they can't physically visit for those reasons at the beginning of the presentation, and you can see a beautiful Roman column still standing pretty intact. So we're going to jump now into the final part of this tour, which is the College of the Augustals. So let's go there right now. Good, so we open up the 360 browser again. This is by the photographer Gary Davis, again on 360 Cities, and this is his work. We're going to jump into this place in Ercolano, and yes, it is the College of the Augustals, and you can see there's some beautifully preserved frescoes on the wall there. If you just imagine and contemplate the history and the work behind all of this, it really is jaw-dropping. But this place was actually a place for freed slaves, and it was a place where those people could gather as a community, as part of the Augustals community, and shape Ercolano at the time, shape the culture and mould the society's development. And it really reflects the theme of this Innovation Festival, the very first one run by the CER and all of its partners, because you don't need to be somebody who has a particular level of power in your community, but if you band together and work together, just like I highlighted in the previous slides with the educators in VR community, it's a wonderful opportunity for you to actually push forward the next generation of technology and innovation in your field. So if this isn't inspirational for the next generation of education and innovation, I don't know what it is.
And there we go. I'm going to just finish off this brief tour with a look at the 3D models. And if you're going to stay in touch with the other events of this 3-day series of events at Ercolano, then you might want to also check out this website, Sketchfab, which is beginning to build a wonderful library of content. Let's just have a look at this now.
And there we go. We are now standing next to an ancient thermopylaeon. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, but this is something that was uncovered in the excavations of Ercolano, and it was actually a place where people could get food for dinner, and often these holes, and we can take a closer look actually, if we just move over here, these holes here were filled with jars or jugs which actually contained the products to be sold, and people could come here in the community and enjoy some hot food.
And there we go. I will stop sharing the screen right now. And that really brings me to the end of my talk to you today. Hopefully it's been some food for thought for how you as an educator, researcher, or even a startup might want to approach the way that you promote the cultural heritage of this beautiful country that is Italy. I would highly recommend you to encourage your students and also yourselves to just check out these 3D models on websites like Sketchfab and like 360cities.net, because they are easily accessible through a browser on your computer. You do not need to spend money at this stage on the hardware. So that's it from me today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. And I look forward to hearing from Marco Capellini, who I believe is up next.
Today, basically after COVID-19. Digitalization is something today starts to be understood by everybody, while in 1999 was almost unknown. And we started in 1999 to make digitalization of the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, one of the most worldwide famous museums. And after 5 years, we realized a campaign directly in the museum, which created 1,550 digital works, which go between 100 to 150, 200 megapixels. If you understand the resolution of your iPhone, that's more or less the one. During the years, we have created the assets of works of the Uffizi Gallery in digital to this very high definition. Then we went farther and creating very, very high definition up to 15,000 pixels during the last years. Now we will show some slides of the presentation to make you understand. This kind of activity is made not only at the Uffizi Gallery, but also in other Italian museums, often also abroad. And in parallel with this activity, this is the last slide. If we go further with the first slides, we can see the digitalization activity. We made at the Uffizi Gallery and then in other museums or other museums in Bologna or also very recently in Germany. We start by some details of very famous work. We can carry on with other details. A flower. If we go farther, that's the famous emblem of Florence, the Giglio, and you can see the detail of the work itself, the eye. And then if we go farther, and then I will go back again. I wanted to introduce you with this work because art must be seen in details. And a work like this one in 10,000 pixels can show some wonderful details. If we go a bit farther, we can go to a type of use of this image, a very high definition image, which was started in 2010 in Shanghai, China. The first virtual show, which was organized for the touchscreen organization. Then 6 years after, we go to Milan, where in an ancient farm for trains, we created a space for a new experience for working this kind of works. In Milan, in the steam farm, not very far away from Florence. If we go farther with slides, we have some of the monuments of visitors made on a book we left at the entrance. The idea is to read the comments made by children and adults because they are very, very important for the fact that some of them say, oh, finally technology is used to give a value to our heritage in an emotional and educational way. That's why we can get the word ecotender, which makes our experience and then makes people participate. Those are the elements we want to insert in our work. Our very important moments were wonderful show. I haven't been in Florence for 20 years, but tomorrow I will go. I have never gone to the Uffizi. I will go tomorrow in the future. So digitalization is also the engine to speed up and make people want to go to visit the museum. I want to underline one thing. The Uffizi is not a transposition of a museum, it's a new experience of art within the Uffizi Gallery. Because our work is to introduce new realities. Renaissance experience was also brought to Germany and then in China, Shenzhen, and elsewhere. And the very important thing is that we can see that this type of exhibition with this format, intensive and interactive, fascinates people with totally different cultures. This language works with all the cultures, European and Eastern cultures. This is Pompeii, where we organize some of those technologies to create digital effects within visits of Pompeii. which can be also made in other archaeological sites.
Faccio un piccolo cenno a questa slide che rappresenta un po' l'essenza
This slide is the essence of our technology and includes two software engines. One is a software which allows you to go to virtual reality and then on any tablet, and the other one is based on ontology and is useful to show knowledge. The two softwares together allow us to create paths within the works so they can be fascinating, and then they can also be discovered by students and then teachers themselves who discover new things for the details of the works, and also because of the links or the concepts which belong to different realities. That's coronavirus COVID-19, which arrived. We sped up after COVID-19. Artcentrica is our software, and with Artcentrica we want to bring art into schools through some students' tablets or iPhones. This kind of software does not need infrastructures like devices for virtual reality. And this software is integrated in a series of contents. Today we are in the Gallery of the Uffizi with the 1,550 works. Botticelli, Titian, and others, and the 100 works in the Pinacoteca of Milan, another important museum in Italy. The slide you can see now is just the summary of the work of art. This is one of the works you can make if you get two works, very famous works by Botticelli, and then you can look at the two people, and then you can discover that maybe the model, in this case used by Botticelli, is the same one. Impossible to be made just by all day long by only using the eye. The very, very high resolution is another feature of our work. Depending on what I want to see, I use the software in a different way. Without powerful computers. You can see this slide where you can really get the idea of how important technology is. If you're interested in jewels, one function of suggestion is to use this one for the details of works. This is due to the presentation of Artcentrica. That's concerts which are underlined inside the work itself. Regarding this work, I would like to precise Artcentrica is only found inside the work of art. It's very, very high depending on the view you want to look at. You may be interested in the animals which are inside the work, or maybe the way people are dressed up. Just depending on what you're interested in, you can discover new things. Nonetheless, we use the artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence today is not so intelligent. Today, we can discover it through the details in the work, as there are so many. And the artificial intelligence really needs very deep knowledge. Our idea will be useful in the future more and more to make a categorization on the different categories of works of art.
Andando ancora avanti, ho segnato qui alcuni punti che credo siano interessanti per
Some of the points which may be interested during the time we are now living in COVID-19 period. The first one, I think that
all'interno di tutti gli istituti culturali ci sia la consapevolezza che
there is knowledge that even digitalized works of art
l'ingrediente base che
is a basic ingredient which is useful. The second one
la realtà
is
aumentata, la realtà virtuale
virtual reality.
probabilmente siamo ancora lontani
Maybe we are still far away from the responses which can take this kind of technology
ad un'adozione di massa.
to a mass use.
Tutto ciò che si fa da qui
Obviously, whatever will be done in the future is useful to come in a very short time to that kind of development. For now, this kind of device is still only in niche elite use.
delle aziende per avere un aiuto con la realtà aumentata. Però questa situazione diciamo, cambierà.
The situation will probably
Un altro punto che penso sia molto
change in the next years. And another point is the representation of knowledge. And in this, I can see an opportunity for a series of categories of young people, students who were formed in humanistic disciplines and cannot find the opportunity of a job if they use the representation of media which transport what is linked to the country can have a very strong development, but you need investment to make this work. As a last step, there is a new business models which are now arising and will be brought to life in the future. It was stopped during the COVID-19 before starting again. We will need a long time, maybe, but in the meanwhile, if a person was used to get incomes to ticketing, we have to find some more models. Museums who have seen diminished the number of visitors have to find new forms of remunerations. This brings a new need of development of online services. I think that everybody have understood the idea of services and the contents is not adapted to the new offer of remuneration. So the new idea is to make newer services. We can create the income and then can bring more added income to museums and other cultural institutions, which they could only see at ticketing at the head offices. So our effort is also to improve this kind of technique. And I think that we will see more and more in the future. I think that on the themes, the debate is very, very open. The final slide also shows the email of Marco Cappellini. Thank you, Marco Cappellini.
Grazie, Marco. Gianni, come on up for a discussion. So now we're going to have a brief discussion, and if we could bring back Michael McDonald too on Zoom, we're going to combine in person. Michael, can you hear us and see us?
I can. Hopefully you can hear me too.
Hopefully we can hear him and see him. That's working. So I want to actually start with a question that is coming in. We have people across the country that are submitting questions, and this may be more from Marco and certainly from Michael. But first, I want to tell you that we had a great comment from teacher writing in California. She said, I have a class of 5th and 6th graders. They got up at 5 a.m. We're studying ancient civilizations. So there's a lot of teachers out there who are watching, and we also have a potential to do another session for them tomorrow. More to come. I may stretch my friends here. So the question is, does it take a lot of effort to create those models? Or is there already existing technology that could make this cost efficient? And so I think there's two issues. One is not just creating the virtual reality opportunity, but is there a way that you can do it yourself, not just buy it? How much goes into doing that? Michael, do you want to start, and then maybe we also go to Marco?
Yeah, sure. So great question. And the answer is both. It can cost a hell of a lot of money or not a lot. And it depends. By the way, if you can't hear me, message me. But you can have very sophisticated equipment, or with your smartphone, with your students that teacher out in the United States, get your students to take a panoramic photo of where they're living. You can take that onto a platform called Mozilla Hubs, and that was in the presentation. And you can immerse yourself in real time in what the students captured. And not only that, but you can invite other students in any corner of planet Earth to join you as well. So you just need to scratch below the surface of the fancy technology, and you will begin to see that in your pocket, you've probably got the tools and equipment to do whatever you want.
Marco?
Sicuramente per creare diciamo, qualcosa come quello che abbiamo creato ci vogliono competenze, anni di esperienza. Contemporaneamente si possono creare dei contenuti comunque di qualità, anche ad esempio da parte di una classe, di una scuola, e questo è uno dei nostri diciamo, sogni nel cassetto.
Obviously, you need experience in this field, but even what was asked, you can do it yourself in a classroom, obviously.
E nella nostra visione, nella nostra idea, una classe con le competenze degli studenti favorita dall'affiancamento degli insegnanti potrebbe creare ad esempio il museo digitale della propria città e caricarlo sulla piattaforma.
Well, students themselves, with the help of teachers, could create, for example, a museum in their town and use that on the platform.
E condividendo la piattaforma ci potrebbero essere delle relazioni fra una città e un'altra, fra una scuola e un'altra, attraverso diciamo, queste collezioni dei musei.
And sharing the platform, different towns, different museums could also share their knowledge.
So I know there's a lot of students and teachers who are tired of Zoom and all the different technologies. And so on one hand, they're excited about seeing things and having material. But on the other hand, it's very difficult to tell their kids to go back and look at the computer. So is there a way for them to combine the use of technology to create things in their own environment without having to be on the computer?
Io penso che sempre più si vedranno delle esperienze con software e con tecnologie digitali che hanno una mediazione umana, quindi con delle persone che raccontano qualcosa di significativo rispetto ai contenuti e rispetto alle applicazioni. Quindi penso che l'integrazione fra uomo e diciamo, tecnologia ci possa essere una risposta che crea più quello che si chiama in inglese engagement.
The integration between human beings and technology could be very useful in the future and more interesting.
Michael, do you want to try that one?
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to take it into a different direction here, but I think if I could just support what I'm about to say with this, that there's this misconception often, in my opinion, that this technology is going to replace the teacher or it is one or the other. But I think that being creative as an educator, and I'm sorry, I'm coming at it from a teacher's perspective here, but why not using this technology firstly to immerse your students in a different culture, for example, the site of Ercolano, then looking in your local community physically and taking them, if you can, on a school trip to something which might be from that same period or which reflects something of your aspect of cultural heritage. So I think it all comes down to, as I said in the presentation, to creativity and just thinking outside the box.
Well, and especially now with probably the only place for a little while that we can go with students is outside. I like the idea of perhaps you show them an Ercolano or you show them a museum and then you find something that's similar outside where you can be. Let me ask you, Johnny, to tell us a little bit more. You know, you've studied Pompeii, you've studied Ercolano, many of these civilizations. Why do you think that our schools, our teachers, even our adults, why do you think they need to learn and be exposed to this history? And do you find that people that you tour and take around Italy know a lot, or like what do you think that's most interesting for them?
Well, the most important thing is that Ercolano and Pompeii are probably unique towns in the world where you can still see a civilization the way it was entirely 20 centuries ago. They were like frozen in time. They were not destroyed. Anytime there is an explosion, there is any part of the world, you have maybe lava which comes out and then can sweep away everything. Not in the case of Pompeii and Ercolano and other surrounding towns like Oplontis, Stabia, and so many other smaller ones around. They were covered in a different way. And then that's actually what is really peculiar, is the main feature of both towns, Pompeii and Ercolano. You can see walls standing. You can see, as Michael was showing, the fast food restaurants, the Thermopolia. You can see fountains, real places. You can see, as I was saying before, original lead pipes still transporting today. If you close your eyes, you can see that they are still transporting water at home or maybe in the fountain. You can enter the ancient spa all the time and see the way they would take a bath. See even the latrines all the time, understand the way they use the toilets. You see different things, understand how far away they were 20 centuries ago. Sometimes we'll look at something in Pompeii and Ercolano which look really like made yesterday. And then you say, well, we have not invented anything yet. That's why, when as I said before, that's the roots where we start and then understand. People sometimes don't have the knowledge of the ancient Greek and the Roman history when they come, and that's why more and more they are astonished when they look at something which is so old.
In your experiences, did you ever see a school maybe discovery from the ancient times, from Ercolano or Pompeii, something that was covered that showed us where kids and students went to school?
Well, actually, I'd say that sometimes students come and then they have already studied, some of them have already studied the two towns from the States, from France, from, I don't know, any other country in the world, and they experience themselves something which is simply on the books, and then astonishes them when they touch, when they can visualize what was only photo on the book, and then that makes more and more experience for them. They do appreciate, most of them, especially students, appreciate both Pompeii and Ercolano.
And what do you all think about how quickly are things like virtual reality and artificial reality? And actually, maybe I should stop and ask Michael to define those three. You hear VR, AR, and mixed reality, MR.
Yeah.
Define those for us.
Yeah, so VR is where you are immersing yourself with a headset like this in a virtual world. And that could be a representation of the real world, but you are effectively closing off the physical world around you and seeing that panel, immersive 360-degree content. AR, which is augmented reality, is where you are mapping digital content, often with a smartphone, onto the physical world. So maybe I'm in Ercolano, I hold my phone to a particular Roman column or the Roman baths, and then I can see through my phone the story of that particular artifact. So you're not fully immersed per se, but you're learning about the world. And then you've got MR, which is again kind of with glasses in particular. And interestingly, a few days ago, Google and Ray-Ban, I think, signed a partnership agreement to start to incorporate the two. So it's moving in interesting directions.
Yes, solo un accenno. Penso che le tecnologie di realtà virtuale e mixed reality avranno ancora bisogno di un po' di anni prima di affermarsi.
Virtual reality will need more and more years before defining themselves in the future.
Perché ancora sono, diciamo, complicati dispositivi per l'utente medio.
Because they are still very complicated for the average person.
Però sicuramente la realtà aumentata è già, diciamo, nell'uso di tante persone.
But it is already, the increased reality is already for so many people in the world.
E ci sono delle forme tipo le exhibition digitali immersive che vi ho fatto vedere prima, che sono una sorta di realtà virtuale, diciamo, portata all'uso della, diciamo, la maggior parte delle persone.
But we have some forms of virtual reality already brought to most of the mass people.
Thank you. Anyone here have any questions before I keep going? Okay. So what do you think is the potential for these things to dramatically change education in the globe? Number one. Number two, is there a lot of investment? In other words, are there people who want to spend money on helping making these things a reality in schools, whether in the US or globe?
Io penso che le potenzialità sono davvero enormi, perché ora io mi riferisco alla materia che conosco di più, quindi all'arte e al digitale, e penso che oggi raccontare e scoprire qualcosa per uno studente cinese di un'opera che sta a Firenze o viceversa sia possibile e sia un beneficio a lungo termine per lo studente, che, diciamo, può aprire la mente, può generare anche molto interesse. Quindi ci sono delle opportunità forti. Non so se...
We have great potentialities for the future. I think that if a student is now in China and then wants to see a museum in Florence, that is something which is very, very helpful, and then it can also be increased in the future.
Contemporaneamente sono sicuramente necessari degli investimenti per cambiare il paradigma di modelli di business, come dicevo prima, ad esempio dei musei. C'è bisogno sicuramente di fare delle partnership più forti fra pubblico e privato, e penso che questo possa portare anche allo sviluppo di imprese creative e culturali che spesso fino ad oggi sono rimaste molto piccole.
You need investments, especially in between the public and the private, to bring more in the future.
E ad esempio, dico quest'ultima cosa, quello che in questi giorni si parla molto in Europa dell'utilizzo di quello che viene chiamato, per esempio in Italia, il Recovery Fund, ma il nome corretto è Next Generation EU. E quindi se noi pensiamo di utilizzare nel modo corretto questi fondi che arriveranno anche in Italia, ad esempio per favorire strumenti per l'apprendimento a distanza, allora questo, diciamo, non saranno dei soldi presi ai giovani, ma saranno, diciamo, degli investimenti fatti per i giovani.
Even the recovery fund we have now in Europe can be used for young people, because it must not be used to do things now, but for young people in the future. Investments for them for the future.
Michael, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I think you know, if you consider that approximately 43% of the world's population has a smartphone, and I think just over 3 billion smartphones in the world, versus around about 2% of the world's population that use VR. So there's an awful long way to go in terms of actually getting VR into the hands of people. And I'm not saying that we should do that just for the sake of it. It should be, at the moment, coming from the perspective of, well, how can we best promote what we have? And at the moment, in my opinion, VR is the best way to do this. Maybe the next festival that you organise, I'll be saying it's something different. But for the moment, that's the best way I can see it. And I think something that the two fellow speakers mentioned is actually really important. It's the inspiration. It's how can we inspire people to go to the museums, go to these cultural heritage sites. And if the statistics are correct, that there are approximately 1% of museums across Italy that have Chinese and Arabic content for the foreign visitors. I think that's an opportunity there that we need to try to improve on, because we need to make sure that we promote best what we have, because that's not only going to attract tourists to countries like Italy, but also actually get people activated within the local communities to look a bit more deeply about what's around them and how we can best promote it. So I think we need to really ask deeply, how do we inspire people to connect themselves to the world around them? That's where it comes from me.
Let's stay with you for a second, Michael, because when we first met on the internet, via the internet technology, through LinkedIn, et cetera, your focus was on language learning, right? Yeah. English language learning primarily as an educator. And there's lots of efforts to teach Mandarin, right? There's lots of efforts to teach, obviously, Spanish because of so increasing numbers of Spanish-speaking peoples. Yeah. All wonderful. But there's a challenge in teaching Italian, both in the US as well as Italy. In fact, it's a program that was almost killed, the AP exams. They almost killed the Italian AP exams. Some people in the United States restored them. But one could argue that Italian, because it's a derivative of Latin, because it's a derivative of the civilizations, should be up there with Mandarin and Chinese in teaching. And so as educators and cultural experts, how would you suggest we help frame that proposal, if you will, for people who are with us today?
That's a really important point, because English is, you know, I'm a native English speaker, and I don't want to come across like I believe everybody should learn my language, whether we like it or not. English is one of the lingua francas, along with possibly Chinese and Spanish. But for me, actually, learning English is the door to many other languages. And as you rightly said, much of English is, you know, derived from obviously Latin and Germanic languages. So I think actually English is a good first step, but so is Italian into those Romance languages. That's the door into Spanish and Portuguese and other languages as well. And coming back to something that you said there a few minutes ago about investment, you know, there's money available if you look hard enough. For example, MUR, the website, the Education Authority in Italy, MIUR. If you look on their website now, there's a bando or a call open, 10,000 euros available per project to promote minority languages, such as Catalan in Sardinia or Greco, where I am here, a form of Greek. The money's there. We just need people to, I think, connect better with the academics, the research institutes, and obviously schools and startups as well, in order to mobilize the community to best promote English or Italian, as you just said.
Gianni, what do you think of the language issue?
Well, Latin is less and less taught at school now, but that should be the basis. Together with other subjects, that should be the basis in Italy, but also elsewhere in the world. If we only think that even in England, Latin was one of the languages spoken together with the French and English, then we can understand how important it was. It was considered a third language. Today, we still have words used, for example, in the field of medicine, which are Latin. That's actually the idea. And then in so many other fields, we have the root of words, which is Latin. Sometimes you don't speak a language, but if you have learned Latin at school or studied Latin at school, you can understand the word or integrate the word in that context.
Dico solo una cosa che, ad esempio, Siamo in una generazione che ormai si basa molto sulle informazioni visive. Informazioni visive possono trasportare concetti, come vedevamo prima nella presentazione. Il concetto di cardellino è lo stesso in tutte le culture, la lingua cambia. Allora si potrebbero utilizzare le immagini e i concetti per far imparare, diciamo, come si esprime lo stesso concetto in lingue diverse.
If visual interpretation is mostly used today, in this case we could use words and the visualization together to get to the best level.
I also think that the language, the other reason to add to this Italian, Latin, if you will, is with the derivative, is because when you talk about, as I spoke about earlier, the deficiencies of so many of our students in the United States and worldwide, but I'll speak to the United States in terms of their language understanding. The language has become cut, if you will. It's become narrow. Their reading, it's more difficult for them to read. And I'll never forget trying to relearn the language of my family, Italian, and hearing, say for me, Marco, in Italian, say for everyone, I can't wait to see you. How do you say it in Italian?
Non vedo l'ora di vederti.
Which is translated as there, you know, I wait with impatience. There's also said, you know, I can't wait with impatience. Every expression has more depth to it than I can't wait to see you, right? And so the words become important as you're trying to dissect. And Michael, you had a great virtual reality program. When I first saw you, you had students in an old church in, was it in Lecce, in Bari, in your city? It was an old church, 1100, and people were bouncing around, exploring language from different countries, having conversations, and trying to describe what they were seeing. And sometimes the words don't allow you to describe it unless you have more language available. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, it's as we touched on before, 3D models, the digital twins, the recreation of digital of the physical world into the virtual world is something that we should be trying hard to do more and more, because what VR offered me in that particular instance was this church in Vasta, which is in Salento in Puglia. We had this ancient church, and you can actually now visit it virtually and see the bricks, the wood, and get a sense of what life was like at the time. And it provides a stimulus for conversation. And I think that's the key part here, is that, you know, when you look at the ethnographic studies or the studies of culture, it's often about the journey and not the destination, and the journey of collaborating, discussing, observing. And I think that's what, you know, the technology allows us to do. It starts the conversation. And I'll finish with this. We all want to know about our parents, yeah, our father, our mother, and where they come from. I think it's human nature. So by that reckoning, it should be human nature to try to understand more about where our forefathers came from and people before them. The story of Ercolano is, you know, a wonderful story of humanity, and we need to try harder to make sure that these stories are told. And VR or AR or technology could be the way to do that.
So if there were, and I'll make this the last one, if there were an American company, let's say it's American, maybe it shouldn't be American, maybe it should be an Italian company, I'll challenge people, that connected and linked you all every day, or maybe a few times a month, whatever, with a classroom. So right now, your average classroom goes into history lessons, but instead of the teacher in front of the room, perhaps it's Michael McDonald in one area. And perhaps then there's another one where it's Marco Cappellini talking about art. And perhaps it's Giovanni Tramparolo, Tramparolo speaking about Ercolano. What would it take to get you doing that, right? Could you be teaching people across the world in real time? Would that be something that you think people would entertain?
I'll keep it simple. Yes, sì, è possibile. It's possible. I'm already doing it. People are already doing this in other languages and subjects. The technology's there. Like I said, you don't need to spend the money on the hardware first. You can do it through your web browser. No downloads, free. What we need is to connect teachers and schools together in order to do that. And actually, the knowledge that these two gentlemen today, the fellow speakers, have shared is priceless. Yeah, we need to package that. We need to put that in experiences that are also almost like pre-recorded, so you can actually go in there, and the platforms allow you to do this and have this one-on-one like experience with Giovanni or Marco, explaining and understanding more about the worlds that you're in virtually. So it's all possible. We're doing it now. We just need people to mobilize, get connected, and your event is a wonderful opportunity to do that.
È sicuramente possibile, non sarò io a spiegare le opere d'arte, ci sarà qualcuno che è più esperto di me nel farlo, e fra 2 giorni dovrebbe esserci un primo esperimento di webinar fatto da un'azienda messicana con la quale stiamo collaborando e una speaker fiorentina che parlerà delle piante di Leonardo da Vinci.
It's surely possible, and then in 2 days will be a person. There will be a web lesson, and then a person from Florence will be speaking to people in Mexico about plants in Florence.
Fantastic. Johnny, last word. What would you
Well, I think it's possible 100%. Now I will speak in Latin. There is one conditio sine qua non. Teachers should not get offended because we don't want to get the roles. We just want to give more to teachers.
Capito.
Help.
Capito. Grazie mille. Thank you everyone for joining us.